The Flamingos is a group or a flamboyance of friends who love to write and love to critique. The best part is sometimes some of us agree and sometimes we don't, because we all bring our own perspective to a reading and to a question. In this podcast series, we share our perspective on writing through the questions we receive at flamingoswritenow@gmail.com. I'm Catherine Brown. I'm a writer of published and award-winning short stories and flash fiction, and I'm working on a YA fantasy novel. Melanie?
Thanks, Catherine. My name is Melanie McDonald, and I am a retired criminal defense attorney, and I write mystery thrillers about women who kill and the men who drive them to it. Wendy?
Hi, I'm Wendy Kendall, author of Cat Out of the Bag, Cat with a K for Catherine Watson, international purse designer and amateur sleuth. Avis?
Hi, I'm Avis Adams, and I'm a writer with one book of poetry, Quill Scene, published in 2019. And I also write speculative, historical, and fantasy YA novels, and one of my novels is with a publishing editor. Carl?
My name is Carl Lee, and I write paranormal fantasy. My current project, Selfies, is a paranormal fiction currently under revision for submission to a publisher.
All right. This week, our question is, what does writer's block look like for you, and how do you get past it? I think this is a great question. It isn't uncommon for writers to experience writer's block at some point in their career. There's a lot of debate among writers about whether it even exists. Judy Blume is quoted as saying, "I don't believe in writer's block. For me, there's no such thing as writer's block." Alexander McCall Smith has called it a load of nonsense. He goes on to say, it's more likely to be a symptom of depression, or maybe they've got nothing interesting to say. Using your imagination to create a work of fiction involves exercising the mind, and the more you do it, the more adept you become. Strong opinions, certainly. But for others, it is all too real, and I have experienced manifestations of it myself. I read a really good article on the phenomenon in the New Yorker from March 2016 that discussed some of the research on it. It actually backed up McCall Smith's point to a degree. The researchers tested blocked writers and found them to be unhappy with symptoms of depression, anxiety, increased self-criticism, and symptoms of OCD, like self-doubt, procrastination, and perfectionism. They also found that blocked writers had decreased motivation, ambition, creativity, and joy in writing. These writers were less able to form pictures in their minds, to daydream, or to dream at all. I think this says that there's something to writer's block. If we are called to write and we can't, for whatever reason, I can see it leading to unhappiness, which makes writer's block worse. That article suggested to get around it by finding a way to write without the element of judgment, journaling, for example. I don't know yet what writer's block looks like for my colleagues, but I find myself blocked in a couple of situations. I notice it sometimes when a project seems overwhelming. I don't know where to start on a scene, so I don't, and procrastination sets in. I get past it when I think about the project logically, ask myself questions and start to answer them. What's the point of this scene? What does my character want? What does he or she say, do, and feel? What does the setting look like? Then I jot that down and I can get started. I can also get blocked when events in my life get overwhelming and sap my motivation. Connie Willis has been quoted as saying, "I think there's a tremendous amount of avoidance that goes on while writing." I agree. Writing takes mental effort, and life can erode your enthusiasm for that effort. I struggle with that, and the journaling technique does help. What I also find helpful in that situation is the Pomodoro technique, where you set a timer for a defined period of time, even 10 minutes. If all you write is 10 minutes, at least you got that much done. And often you can write even more. Melanie, do you get writer's block?
Thanks, Catherine, for the great question. And for a long time, I didn't believe in writer's block. I started out by writing NaNoWriMo, just putting words on a page. They came naturally and easily as long as I didn't care what the finished product looked like. What I found was at the end, I had a pile of mush, so difficult to create into an actual novel form. But at least I had words. As I drew closer to having a finished product that I now hope to have published, it has become much more difficult. I never thought harnessing the power of imagination into a readable novel would be so hard. The amazing images in my head take so much effort to translate convincingly onto the page. Everywhere I look, there are things that need to be fixed. Every time I fix one thing, another looms large, and it finally becomes overwhelming, and I have to let it be for a while. Mistake! Once I put it down, it becomes so much harder to pick it up again. At times, I dread the thought of looking at it. I have found that accountability helps me get through. If I have to have something prepared to read to a critique group, then I will force myself to go through 4 or 5 pages. Once I start, it's easier to carry on. Very important point here. Have a critique group who you feel comfortable reading to, that is not overly competitive and gives honest yet compassionate words of encouragement. Finally, don't be afraid to start over. If the project doesn't gel, even after you've given it your best effort, if the words on the page don't become something you can believe in, start over. I'm not saying to drop it when the going gets tough, just that you should be realistic and write with joy. I spent 2 years working on something and finally decided that I just couldn't make it work. After all the hours, it seemed like a defeat, but in my heart, I knew it was time to give up. Now, after letting it sit for a couple of years, I know how to use it in the sequel to what I've just finished. Trust your heart. It will tell you what you need to do. Write with intention, write with joy. Wendy, do you ever get writer's block? What do you do?
Writer's block. For me, it exists hand in hand with procrastination. These two are very good friends of mine. Sometimes they join me disguised as, I'm too busy. I have so many other things that absolutely have to be done first. Or they come incognito as, I have so many other quick things I can do that will take such a short time, I'll get them out of the way first. But then there ends up being too many short things, and I end up with no time or energy left. Or they come deviously as, oh, poor me, I deserve to be anywhere else or enjoy any other entertainment instead of working at the laptop today. Let me warn you, writer's block and procrastination are villains. In order to avoid their company, I try a few tactics. I have a routine time of day every day when I write. I don't always write scenes in sequence. I write what I'm most interested in writing that day. It all gets smoothed in the editing. I have a routine, something at the start that tells my brain and my heart that it's time to write. A place. I have a den that I call my studio. Or on nice days, I use my patio. I have music, no lyrics for me. One of my favorites is a Kevin Eubanks CD. And I have a treat, tea and a sweet for me as my rewards for getting to work. I remove distractions, including social media, people, TV, and my document is already on my screen waiting for me. Also, I work best under deadlines. So I impose deadlines, or an editor does, and then I'm motivated. And I have weekly and monthly to-do lists, and mentally I love checking off writing tasks as done. If all that fails, as it has on occasion, I learned something that always works for me. My teacher, author Pam Binder, taught me so very many things, including this. Whenever I didn't have a scene done for homework or edits finished for class, I would recite a list of excuses to her. She would wait patiently until I was done whining, and then she'd look me in the eye and say, well, Wendy, do you want to have a book? Stunning response. Of course, I'm telling you, Pam used to walk uphill in 10 feet of snow every day, both ways, in order to get her writing done, or something like that. Pam's words echo loudly in my brain every time I try to put off writing or the very dreaded editing. Those words are how my mystery, Cat Out of the Bag, got published. Those words are how the sequel I'm now writing will get done. So next time you're visited by the villains of writer's block and procrastination, ignore them. Remember 7 short words. Do you want to have a book? Avis, what do you think?
Well, I think this is an amazing question and one that has stumped writers for a millennium. Personally, I am in the camp that does not believe in writer's block, but I have had many times when I didn't write, and those times did not make me happy. I'm generally speaking not a procrastinator. And if I don't write almost every day, I get very cranky and develop flu-like symptoms. But I've learned to recognize certain triggers that interfere with my writing routine. One incident took me by surprise at a conference where, as a newbie writer, I received a brutally honest critique of my first novel by an editor whom I really thought would love my book. I was demoralized by the experience and couldn't pick up that novel for 6 months. That was writer's block, incited by fear of failure. But with a lot of self-examination, I got over it. And I've developed an ability to hear things I don't want to hear about my work and to keep working. It's still hard to hear anything that isn't praise, but I want to improve. And to do that, I need to be open to critique. And by the way, the editor was right on. My novel did begin on page 50, and I was telling my story instead of showing it. So some other things that throw me off are changes in my routine. When I retired from full-time teaching, I had to try out different schedules until I found one that fit my new schedule of freedom and no schedule. And that took over 6 months and lots of false starts. Plus, my husband is also retired and he has boundary issues, so I get lots of interruptions. Sometimes vacations will throw my schedule off and I have to retrain myself to beg or get my butt in a chair and write. But I can always find my way back to the writing, or else I get flu-like symptoms. So James Baldwin said he couldn't write unless he was in the perfect geographical location. And there he found the key to the language that allowed him to write his books. He had several different places, in France and in Switzerland, just to name a couple. Other writers have commented on the importance of place as well. Then there's Peter Elbow, who's considered the father of the free write. And he said writer's block is when a writer is not writing. So sit down with a pen in hand and paper at the ready, or in 2020, your laptop, and write. He suggests that you write whatever comes to your mind, and if you can't think of anything, write, I can't think of anything, until you do think of something. And before you know it, ideas will flow from your fingers onto the page. The trick is to set a timer for 10 minutes or so, sit down and write nonstop, even if you can't think of anything. And the magic is that something will come to your mind. It may take the entire 10 minutes to get an idea, or you may end up writing beyond 10 minutes. As an English teacher, I've done this with hundreds of students, hundreds of times, and they are always amazed by the results. Another author, Natalie Goldberg, blames monkey brain for writer's block. And that is when you self-edit as you write, which is killer. So she suggests not letting your inner editor into your brain. So sitting quietly, pushing all the chaos of your day from your brain before you begin your free write is a great way to begin writing or your writing session for the day. So to that end, another tactic I use with my students is meditation, where they sit comfortably and close their eyes and think no thoughts. And they can't do that. They can't think no thoughts. It's very hard. But once everyone is calm and the room is quiet and we're quiet for a little while and I dim the lights, and then pretty soon people start fidgeting, and then we begin our free write. But it's nice to just empty all the chaos from your mind. My students loved that assignment. A really great classic for dealing with writer's block is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And she addresses writer's block through a 12-step program for people who need to recover from the inability to create. And it's for artists of all kinds, not just writers. So by using a series of daily writing exercises and creative exercises, if you're blocked and need to get jump started, you might try checking that out, and you might not. You might find that you don't even need to go through all 12 steps. But take heart and take up your pen or open your laptop and find the place where you can write that will provide the key to your language so you can write. I've had to train myself to write wherever I am because I'm not rich. So here it is. But just know that writing is an investment and the payout is up to you. Do you want a book or not, right, Wendy? So really, if that's the truth, then the sky's the limit. Go forth and write. Carl, I know you have notes on this great question.
Well, Avis, you know me so well. I always have notes. I also do not believe in writer's block. At times, I wish I had Wendy's discipline to set a particular time and place to write, but I don't. I write whenever I write whenever I write. For me, writing is fun, which is probably why I'm still working on getting a novel published, and Wendy has a novel published. Setting a schedule would diminish my enjoyment, though. I've gone days without writing. I haven't gone months. I believe what people call writer's block is actually them trying to write a page, a scene, or a project that they're not feeling in that moment. As writers, we have all learned many from many sources. Pam Binder taught me that you don't have to write a novel from page 1 to page 400, and that helped me a lot because I was very linear before I met Pam. If I get stuck when I'm writing, I will write somewhere else in the story. I will write, the second to the last scene in the story, even though I barely got the first scene written. If that doesn't work, I will work on a different project, or I will work on a character sketch. I love working on character sketches, and I hope we get to talk about it someday. I interview my characters, and it's all written. One last thing that I do, even though it is 2020, Avis, I will frequently take pen and paper and write longhand. I don't know what the difference is between writing longhand with pen and paper and typing on the computer, but it literally, because I can write so fast in pen and paper, I don't have time to critique it. I don't have time for that internal editor to say, oh no, that's not the right word. Just skip and go. And I can churn out quite a bunch of crap in 20 minutes doing that. But when I put it into the computer, then I have the freedom to edit it and make it prettier. So I've gotten past the writer's block at that point. And if all else fails and I just can't write anything at the moment, I have the good fortune of being able to beta read one of my members of my flamboyance, because they're each and every one amazing. The cure for the imaginary condition of writer's block, it's obvious: write anything. So I want to thank my flamboyance of flamingos for this great session. What does writer's block look like for you, and how do you get past it? And thank you, fellow writers, for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed our podcast and learned something you can take away with you to help you in your writing journey. Please send us questions about writing to flamingosrightnow@gmail.com. That's flamingosrightnow@gmail.com, no spaces, all one word. You might hear our responses to your questions on Flamingos Right Now podcasts. Hope to see you the next time.